I'm about to explain to you why the American education system is not as bad as you might think it is. Okay, so bear with me here. I want to start off by saying it does have its faults, but we are the people that make up the country, right? So the country is only going to be as good as us. That goes for all the systems that are in place and everything else. There is limitless possibilities for humans, different paths we can take throughout life, and different things. Like the whole array of possibilities available to us nowadays is completely unimaginably extensive, and we can't even comprehend all of them, right? So when we're born, there's immediately different families that we could be born into, different countries, different circumstances, right? But then each of those circumstances shape different pathways, right? And those pathways branch into other pathways, and eventually you're at a career which will branch off into 20 other different pathways, right? You can never fully exhaust your options as a human, and that's what sets us apart from other animals. When they're born, they kind of exhaust their options up to a point, regardless of which way they go and which branch they follow. They're always going to end up exhausting their options unless they die early. Due to technology and human cognitive function, we've developed even more possibilities and even more systems that we can follow. And it's really amazing if you think about it. Education, and then there's human nature. Human nature has been said in the 18th century to be bad. That's what gave rise to the Puritans and how they were talking about, or how they believed that human emotions and urges were bad, and how being carefree and having fun were not very smiled upon, I guess. I don't know what the correct term for that would be. But then the 19th century rolled around. People were like, oh, okay, humans are kind of good, because they started having technological innovation and things of that nature. Well, since the time of Plato, there have been debates about the nature of man, whether he is competitive, good, bad, evil, kind in nature. Equal if men are equal to each other in nature. Plato and Aristotle actually believed that men were not equal, and some actually deserved to be slaves, but that was on an intellectual basis. They believed that some people were smarter and some people were dumber, and if the smarter people deserved to be, not slaves, then they deserved to be not slaves. That's a really dumbed down version of the story, but unfortunately YouTube doesn't have the attention span to watch that. But the whole thing about human nature has actually come to the point where, and back then when they were trying to discuss human nature, it was really difficult because they didn't have the technology or scientific information or methods of testing that we do today, right? They didn't have near the audience size. They didn't have nearly enough sample. So we were left with very bad, biased evidence as to what human nature really was. And the thing about human nature as well is that societies since the age of Plato have been manipulating it. Civilizations have been manipulating it about what the human nature is, right? To enforce their ideals upon their citizens. Now, this sounds horrible, right? And I guess to some degree it could be seen as that, but in reality, you're trying to create a civilization where people can live and thrive, right? So it's somewhat justifiable, in my opinion. If you don't believe me, the most recent example would probably be the Americans, right? Us. So, in the U.S., the Industrial Revolution started around the 50s, and around 1859, Charles Darwin actually posted a book. I think it was The Origin of Species, where he talked about the natural laws. One of them was the law of natural selection, and the other one was, I think it was the law of, I don't know. But the whole thing with the Industrial Revolution was the rise of the middle class, competition, you know? Competition was introduced as the human nature, right? And we were enforced of that belief. And then this article comes out about the law of natural selection and survival of the fittest, and holy shit, our society is now backed. Like, this common narrative that's our country's belief in what human nature really is actually backed by this nature law, right? This law of nature. However, conveniently overlooked was that a few years prior to releasing that book, Charles Darwin actually pointed out that there is as much competition in nature as there is cooperation. So we kind of twisted that narrative, and that goes the same for all ideological concerns in all civilizations. The USSR, hell, Germany, Stalin and Hitler abused the hell out of those. Even Mussolini, they abused the hell out of those realizations, right? Even Julius. So it happens, and it's kind of necessary, right? But that being said, what defines human nature? What is human nature? Well, today we have the scientific equipment and sample size to be able to travel around the world to different isolated groups of humans, both in large countries, small countries, island nations, to see that these social groups that are limited, these island nations that are still using Stone Age technology, right, are actually, while they have different values, none of them show like a central human nature other than being neutral. So what goes into defining it? Like, some island nations they valued physical touch, right? They valued physical intimacy. Others, some social practices were completely, frowned upon, while in other, separate social subgroups, they were completely okay. They were actually practiced. In some circumstances, competition was favored and survival of the fittest was true. But in other situations, the idea of competition didn't even register for them, right? It was all about cooperation, everything about their lives and how they functioned, and there were multiple thousands of samples in this study. There were actually multiple studies that were done. And yeah, so human nature varies, but what does it vary on? Circumstance, okay? Well, what do we get from circumstance? What we're given, Education, I guess we can kind of learn from it, learn about our environment. That's how birds and, squirrels and shit, function. They learn about their environment. They learn what's good, what's bad, what hurts them, what doesn't. Okay. And what separates humans is that the things that hurt us, birds come with like an instinctive idea of what to stay away from, you know, a predatory sense. But when it comes to humans, we haven't had enough time to evolve to all that. Our population just exploded into the billions, you know, within a couple hundred, I'm not gonna say a couple 100,000. It was like a couple tens of thousands of years ago, right? So a lot of our problems haven't had time to, they're too complex to be able to us be born with the ideas of knowing what to do. Sorry about that. So the issues that we face, we have to learn about. And the more developed the country, the more developed the civilization, the more of a challenge that places on the education and how we learn, right? We still come with primitive desires and, you know, like I was saying about the birds, but that's about basic things like food, sleep, shelter, etc. And that does influence our actions. But the way in which we go about getting those things is so much more different than any other species, right? And the issue with that is that we need a good education. We need to understand, you know, we need like a full perspective on what we're given. Yeah, guys, like, so those are the challenges of human nature, right? Or that's, you know, the importance of education. It completely defines, you know, how we turn out in nature. For our situation in the Industrial Revolution, it was competitive. And that was the prevailing mindset in nature, right? But we need to realize that, like, just the situation overall, because clearly over some time, this is going to change, and we need to be aware of that when it does. We're still in an industrial age, but the issue with an industrial age is that people become more dependent on each other, and also less trusting of each other because of the competitive nature. So you can see the kind of conflict that's going to start arising soon, and the delicate balance that is going to come along with a democracy. I mean, financially, that's already prevalent, you know, but in terms of education and citizens, we really gotta, like, watch out for that. So education, it's really, it has a big role to play in this, in informing our people and shaping our perspective. You know, in the USSR, Stalin and other leaders completely changed all of the sciences, all the humanitarian work, all of it, even psychology. They shaped it. They went into the textbooks, they went into like parks, and changed the statues, changed the information. They changed definitions of words to help promote communism. They went really far in depth of this stuff. They printed over 10 million copies a year of the Stalin's autobiography, right? And there were also other books that were promoting communism. Give you reference, they made like 9 million a year of one of the books, 10 million a year of the other book, and like I think 12 million or 10 or 12 million a year of just millions of fucking books of Stalin's autobiography, right? And to give you reference, the Christian Bible all over the world is spread out about 25 million copies a year at the time. This was the 20th century, right? That's a big deal. You know, that was one country. Of course, geography has a role to play in it. They would even name things to help promote communism. It was a bad situation, and because Stalin put his roots so deep in it, no other leader has really done anything to reverse that work. Maybe on the surface level political campaigns they have, but still in Russia, if you were to go, you can talk to people around there, and there have been a lot of studies, there have been a lot of students that speak Russian that go over there, even Russian people that come over. They speak about how they pity Americans and how they can't enjoy the benefits of communism, how the UN is like the puppet of Wall Street. You know, some believe that North Korea or South Korea invaded North Korea, right? So there's a lot of things that are being misconstrued and forced ideas. So we've seen that education can be used to free or enslave people. So how do we, with such a growing number of people, that's another thing. How are we supposed to train? We need accurately trained people for this job. We need people, like dedicated people, to understand deeply about the impact of both the impact of what they're doing, the history of how other people have done it, and not just the psychology of how to do it, but how to teach what they're actually teaching, Like, just because they can practice it doesn't mean that they can teach it, right? And we need actual teachers, not, we need like professionals, right? And that being said, let's look at our education system. The people have at least four years of experience, right? 4 years of college, professional college, and then in some cases even 5, right? In most cases even 5. And that's just on the subject that they're teaching, right? In no other country are you going to find that. Even the countries like China that, heavily promote education and force their people to go, In America, we have over 175,000 public educations. That's not even counting private schools and stuff. And we have like 18,000 universities and colleges. That's not even counting the private ones, that all have trained staff like this. And our numbers of our population have increased to such a high degree so quickly, right? How in the fuck are we supposed to keep up with all those people, right? We're supposed to get trained high quality personnel, but we have this huge fucking demand for education, and we have people willingly send their children. We don't force them. They willingly send their children to get a better education, right? It's a lot of stress for the public schools to keep up. And there's also growing outside influence. TV and radio, you might not think of them as education, but they are. They have a huge influence on children's development. And mostly for the worst part, because we have such provocative, we let our children watch it indiscriminately, right? It's like really sadistic, and virtually every newsstand has some kind of like sadistic comics, just like a real waste of time. And virtually, very seldomly has any child seen the inside of a library. That's the point we're at in education. It is kind of sad. It is very sad. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but it's important for us to realize that we do have an education system that is up and standing. We do have an advanced education system in place. Yes, there's a lot of room for improvement because technology and people are expanding rapidly, right? And it's really difficult to express everything that I want to say here because there's so much research and literature that's gone into this in this study. I'm not just preaching to you what I've heard from one book. I'm preaching to you what I've heard from multiple sources, and scientific ones not at that. I'm just, combining them together and kind of like drawing inference. But despite what we think needs to be done, the work that needs to be done, we have an extensive education system already in place, in existence. It's very important that we be grateful for what we already have. Other countries, I know this sounds really cliche, but it is really important to realize that some of our lowest level colleges are the top level education that some other countries have. It's not an easy thing to do. And there are a lot of steps that can be taken, like I've said multiple times, to increase our education system. One of the first questions that's asked is, can we afford it? Well, around the 20th century, we were spending about I think it was like 20 billion, or not 20 billion, 20 million, I think, I'm not positive on this, on the numbers, but I remember it was something averaging around 3 cents for our national income, which was like 489 billion or million or something like that. I don't remember the numbers. I'm not going to try to give you the statistics like that. But yeah, people spent more money on their cars than they did on their kids' education. So there are a lot of things that can be changed, but this is just a brief overview that I wanted to go over. I'll go more in depth in another video.